Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and welcome. I'm very proud and happy to have an amazing interview for you today. My name is Imran Nalwala, the host of ACC Live 5. And on the show today, we have Dr. Keith Wood, principal of Brooks Middle School and the co chair of Harvard University Principals Center Advisory Board. Let me get him on the screen. Dr. Wood, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Imran. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us and thank you for making time from your busy schedule. I know full time principal that you have a lot of other things to worry about and work on, but we definitely appreciate you giving us some time to, share from your wisdom.
Certainly.
So to get right into it, Dr. Wood, we mentioned a lot of prerequisite qualifications that you have in terms of being part of Harvard and also being principal at Brooks Middle School. Can you quickly, before we get into the topic at hand, can you give me a little bit more information about your background and what led you into education and wanting to become a principal?
Sure. Um, I guess my pathway has been pretty interesting in terms of my journey to education and get to this particular place and space. Um, I grew up on the south side of Chicago and pretty much had spent time between two homes, both my grandparents, one in the shadow of White Sox Park, and the other a little bit further south in what was then and now known as Pill Hill. And so my parents were also on the south side, and at a very early age in my life, decided to move out of the city for what I could say was just a better opportunity. So we moved out to Bellwood, Illinois. And from there, I attended elementary school, middle school, and Proviso West High School.
Wow.
And I would love to say that I was an excellent student, but I was not. And quite honestly and quite frankly, I had no idea what education was about. My parents definitely knew they wanted for me to grow up in a different environment, but we really didn't know much about like how to navigate the educational system. It was pretty much just go there because that's where you're supposed to be. But also having this idea that education is important. Um, it wasn't until I think I was a junior at Proviso West where a teacher pulled me to the side, and I remember the conversation. Mrs. Palm, who's known as Mrs. Wallace now, um, pulled me to the side and she says, "Hey, Keith, you're really wasting the talents that you have. You're an excellent writer, and you should really make good use of it." And I would love to say things kind of changed for me then, but it did not. I was able to graduate, but just barely. And at that time, my parents gave me pretty much an option, but it was an ultimatum. It was either go to college, go to the military, or just get full time employment. I didn't have any money for college because that wasn't the thing that we did at that time. So I just went to the military. I can say entering the military was probably the best thing that happened to me. I spent time in southern states, and I was a city boy, so I really hadn't traveled that much. So I really started coming in contact with people from across the nation, and really getting a clear understanding of the differences in affluence that people had and underwent, which was not related to color or race or any other thing. It was pretty much just social economic status. And I really started picking up on differences and injustices and struggles. I spent some time over in Germany and then returned home after a couple of years and joined the Illinois National Guard and continued to come across these disparities. And it was around that time that I started taking junior college classes. And mind you, I wasn't a very good student and started out those first courses having to take them on a pass fail basis. So essentially paying
Wow.
money to take classes to prove that I would take it responsibly and was qualified to do it. Long story short, I did quite well. I surprised myself, I surprised my family, and that junior college experience turned into a bachelor's degree at University of Illinois in the field of education. I also went on to get my master's in school leadership. through University of Illinois at Chicago, and was, I believe, the first member of my family to earn a doctorate through Loyola University. So definitely, um, that was my pathway to education, and I think in the military, it's really where it set in with me, where I wanted to be a part of something bigger. I wanted to be part of the solution and not a part of the problem, and that kind of like put me where I am today.
That's an amazing career path, trajectory, history. It's amazing in terms of how you kind of found your path, and in terms of the conversation today, promoting open conversations. I've heard, I heard a lot of things that you just mentioned. For example, when you were younger, you guys didn't really know how to navigate the educational setting, and then also you weren't the best student, as a younger individual. What do you think traveling specifically did for you, whether it was through the military or not? But what do you think traveling to new places, new countries, meeting new individuals and new cultures did for you in terms of like expanding and opening your mind?
And I think that's it. What you just stated, it was about the experience. I could have spent all of my time on the south side of Chicago and had that one perspective, but by traveling and engaging in conversation with others, hearing their stories, and seeing with my own eyes the differences, um, and being able to compare lifestyles in the States and lifestyles in Germany. Again, from a kid who really didn't anticipate or expect to travel, and just really connecting with other people, and not being specific to a race or culture or ethnicity. It was kind of very formative for
Hmm.
me.
So let me. I have some notes that I crafted in preparation of this, but I'll ask you one of my latter questions now. In terms of, and I don't want this to get too political necessary, but just very generally, do you think a lot of the issues that we saw in the country over the last year in terms of people of different backgrounds clashing and the different conflicts that arose, do you think if people did more traveling, if people got outside of their comfort zone a little bit more, that we could maybe mitigate some of these occurrences?
Yes, and I truly believe that. I think when we kind of stay isolated in our own places and spaces, we kind of like think that that is the norm. If we just look at what's being presented to us through media and aren't very discerning about the information that comes forward, we kind of put ourselves in this mindset. But I truly believe by opening up that conversation, engaging in dialogue with other people from different places, or who have different perspectives and viewpoints, is certainly where we have opportunity to continue to learn, grow, and develop. I really do think that one of the major issues for us as a nation, and maybe even globally, is our inability to listen to the perspective and viewpoints of others. And it seems as if we're so polarized in our beliefs and our opinions that if anyone says anything that's contrary or causes us to think, we kind of shut it down. And
Hmm.
I don't think that that's going to do us any good service in the term or in the future. We have to engage in conversation dialogue.
So how do you take what you just said and impart that on the students at Brooks Middle School? Like, what are some things that people can learn from your experience and from what you're doing as a principal in their academic setting? So if I'm a principal or a teacher at my school, what can I do to promote those dialogues and have that type of conversation?
I think that is multifaceted, and I think that a lot of the work does happen within schools, but I also think it's broader, and it happens in communities. And I'm quite fortunate to live in Bolingbrook and work in the same town that I live in. And so, with that, I have opportunity to engage in conversations with a variety of our community members. Um, it could be through social service programs. I'm connected to at least three that I'm thinking of real off the top of my head. Lions Club, which is a community-based organization, the Valley View Education Richmond Foundation, which is another, and the H2O.
Hmm.
which provides services and supports for middle school and high school students. And through those relationships and conversations, and then also with our local politicians, we're able to kind of like determine what community needs are. But to take that back to the school setting, one of the things that we're doing is exploring what does equity look like in our building. We're very diverse. We have, when I first started, it was about 10 years ago. It's like almost perfect mix, like 30, 30, 30 of African American, Hispanic, white. And one of our greatest strengths we always like to talk about is our diversity. But what do we mean when we say that, and how do we put that into action? And how do we get kids who kind of come up together through elementary, middle, and on to high school, even though they're diverse and in proximity? How do we get them to really, really connect with each other and also adults for that matter? So we're really exploring that here, particularly this year, in light of all the things that have happened nationwide in the not so recent months in terms of social
Hmm.
injustices and the fight for social justice, and thinking about like what do we do to prepare our students for future success? What do we do to prepare our students for a future that we can't even fathom at this point? And think about it. I work with sixth, seventh, and eighth grade students. By the time they hit the world, that's could be 3 to 7 to 11 years beyond. And I don't
Wow.
know too many people that can predict where we're going to be a decade out. But we do know that conversations, the ability to communicate with each other, whether that's orally or in writing, is a critical skill. We also know that collaboration is a critical skill. They call them like 21st century learning skills. And so everything that we do and think about and reflect on is how do we get our kids to engage in conversation and dialogue? How do we get them to clearly articulate their thoughts, their feelings, and to allow place and a space for them to do so, whether that's through social emotional perspectives or like small team or group settings or in the larger classroom. It's critically important that we teach our kids how to think critically and how to engage in conversation and respectful conversation.
Hmm.
We also know that part of the middle school experience and kids just through development, they love to like argue, right? So whether it's trying to argue with adults, uh, I guess they would say it's negotiating. I don't know what it would be called, but how to do that respectfully but also with an open ear. So you're listening and speaking to both sides of it.
So again, very fascinating. Let's boil it down to something a bit more simple for the audience. When you say equity in the classroom, I think a lot of us are used to hearing the word equality. So when we say equity, and in terms of the context we're talking about, coming from a different cultural background, people who come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, what do we mean by equity?
Equity, actually, I mean, it has so many different definitions, and it really depends on uh, who you subscribe to. But from my perspective, I think equity is essentially looking at the goals that you set, whether it's for your school or the community, and ensuring that you have structures and processes in place to make sure that everyone can attain that and utilizing their strengths to help them get to that point, but also realizing the barriers or the obstacles that are in place and helping them overcome those barriers and obstacles so that you're kind of like um, leveling the playing field or making sure that everyone has that opportunity. Just because there folks have differences and experiences or knowledge or anything that could potentially detract from them attaining the goals that have been set, um, we need to work to eradicate them, to provide support, to provide services. So, I guess in short, equity is just making sure that everyone gets what they need to succeed.
And then how do we work with our educators, our variety of educators in different cities in different states in terms of teaching them about more equitable practices in the classroom and taking into account when if you have a big school and you have students from different backgrounds are like other than like how you just described it, where do we start by making them understand that when people come from a different background um they may need more help or they may need more support.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is you could connect it back to experience, right? We have a lot, I think just through my own experience working with a variety of educators, we kind of come to it from this like middle class perspective, right? And we
Hmm.
kind of think that our students, despite what the data says, we kind of like just kind of like focus on what we bring to the table in terms of our values and our beliefs. So part of it is really just being open and being presented with the variety of our students, the diversity that comes and have an understanding of different cultures and social levels of socioeconomic status. Even right here in Bolingbrook, we have low income housing, affordable housing, but we also have just on the other end of the spectrum, $1 million homes
Right.
and everything in between. But we can't think as educators that everyone's coming from the same background, has the same experience, because that's not true. One of the things that I did initially coming into the community to kind of like bring that understanding forward is doing community walks. And so we would take staff, and they were very happy to do it. And we go out and visit our incoming sixth grade class, and that's about 400 or so students, give or take, on a year. And so that means a lot of staff, a lot of buses, a lot of going to homes, and just that simple um, connection, that face to face, and going out into the community has really helped shape um, people's beliefs and thoughts about the students that they serve. But another is just in staff meetings, having conversations about the students in front of us. I remember one activity where it was kind of like, relationships and connections. And we put up all of our students' names, and we had staff rotate through and just highlight a meaningful interaction, or if you know about a student's interest or hobby, if you knew anything about their family. And that helped us see that some kids really connected, but then there were other kids who were just kind of like, you know,
Hmm.
falling through the cracks, to use that terminology. So I think it's really is just about exposure, experience, and engaging in that conversation. So it goes beyond just learning about curriculum and learning about instruction. It's about who are our students, what are they bringing to us, what are their talents, their interests, their abilities, their strengths, and what can we do to shape and create a learning environment that's really helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting because for people, I used to teach myself, but I think from the outside perspective, we always look at what we can provide our students, but we fail to realize the importance of like teacher training or professional development or giving our teachers the opportunities to grow. So it's very interesting. I've never heard of the couple activities that you described, and I think that's like very implementable by many schools.
Mhm.
So thank you for that innovative approach. Um, and then I guess my follow up question is your role at Harvard. Talk to us a little bit about being the co-chair in the portion of Harvard that you are co-chair of, and what does that entail?
Sure. Um, I can tell you a little bit about like how I even got there. I've been
Sure.
working in Berkeley '87, and my superintendent at the time, Dr. Smith, put out some professional development flyers. And I don't know, it was something about that name recognition, Works Institute, Harvard University. And I looked at it, I was like, this is kind of like, I mean, that's the dream that a lot of people who attend college, like everyone knows Harvard, right? That
Right.
name recognition. So it's kind of what people aspire to. I was like, well, if I could go to this institute, I could get close. I don't necessarily, I can say that I attended there, but I went there. So
Right.
I went as a participant to a Leadership Evolving Vision Institute, and it was a week long institute basically for seasoned administrators to kind of like determine their next level of work. It wasn't for novice administrators, for people who have been in in the administration for, you know, I guess 3 to 5 years or so, and was really looking for kind of like that next step. And
Hmm.
that's what that provided for me. It was transformative. I have learned and grown so much as a result of my experience there. But that first year, my facilitator, they took a group of 140 and broke us into smaller groups, and that's who we spent most of our time with over the course of the week.
Hmm.
My facilitator, Dr. Lindsay, I guess she saw something in me, just like Mrs. Palm did in high school. And she pulled me to the side towards the tail end of it. And she asked me, it's like, would you be interested in coming on board as a facilitator? And I said, what? You want me to come back and actually like be a part of this team? Of course, sign me up. And I've been doing it for the past 10 years. Um, 5 years ago, I was invited to be a member of the advisory board of the Principal Center. Um, a great honor. I was very happy to do that. I'm still currently doing it. I also serve as a co-chair of it. And essentially, what that advisory board does is we kind of learn. It's set up to help us continue to learn and grow as professional educators, but it's also designed for us to provide input and advice from a practicing administrator who's out there in the field. So it's like there's this connection between theory and action. So they propose
Hmm.
programs or new directions or workshops to try to tap into our thinking on what the needs are and adapt programming to meet the needs of what's happening across the nation. We also quite fortunate to visit districts across the nation. So I've been in California, New Orleans, Cambridge, Cambridge, Boston area. So just a wide variety of learning experiences, seeing what works um, and what's doing well, so that they can replicate it in their work and provide service and support for school leaders, but also so I could take it back home and do some things that are of import and that are practical for the work in my community.
So do you feel like, because my assumption would be that like the best and brightest of principals of schools are now meeting together in one place, and they're exchanging and sharing ideas, and now they're able to take those ideas back to their schools, just like you said. So how innovative is the experience when you go? How often are you like blown away by, things that other schools are trying?
Often, it's very interesting. I think every school has its own story.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I tend to do is try to look for what are those common themes or threads that it doesn't matter. I went to a school, Epiphany, in in uh, in Massachusetts, and I got to tell you, I was just blown away by the staff's commitment to serving students, where most schools and most communities would have not even looked twice at the kids because they were what we will call like kind of like DCFS or
Okay.
foster kids, kind of like
Hmm.
kids who just really didn't have any any hope, reasonable hope.
Hmm.
But this school took them, embraced them, loved them, nurtured them from fifth grade through high school, um, even supported them through college. And then the most interesting thing about that visit is that many of the staff have been Epiphany students. So how
Wow.
powerful and how transformative is that? And what that boiled down to is just making a commitment and not saying, hey, there are no barriers or obstacles that we can't overcome. There are no excuses. We're going to wrap these kids. We're going to embrace them, and we're going to teach them up. And you see the fruits of the labor. It is very doable. It's so inspiring.
I'll have to put you on the spot with this question, but we have some viewers of this program whose children go to private schools, and sometimes faith-based private schools. So, what advice would you give to people who may be listening that work at these private schools as administrators or teachers? And our conversation is about promoting dialogue. We've discussed equity. My assumption is that since private schools have to rely on the tuition for funding, what are some things that the schools can focus on to make sure that they're trying to reach a certain pinnacle in terms of the experience you're providing the kids. And I'm saying that with the preface that maybe they don't get the same help that public schools get. So what can they focus on while they're not getting maybe say local or federal government help?
Okay. I, I don't know. I think my first response to that would be to think about it from 21st century learning skills, right? So anything that's involving students collaborating with each other, critical thinking, um, communication skills, and I'm forgetting the last one, but anything that's related to that. I don't know that you need to teach specific processes to solve a problem. It really is about how do you take information and utilize it in context to create solutions to whatever you're experiencing. And so, anytime you have like kids engaged in experiences, whether it's tailored to meet their needs within a classroom, or experiences outside. I'm a big believer in field trips. Kind of like I take that back to like my journey from south side of Chicago to Bellwood, to southern states, to Germany. These experiences help expand my mind, and I think many families do these things when they travel, but kind of be conscious about the conversations you have with your students if you're a parent. But from the educator perspective, pulling those experiences in and shaping the learning environment to utilize a student's experience to leverage it to create these experiences for kids to be as successful as
Hmm.
possible. Definitely, technology is a part of it. We can't get away from it, but we also have to teach our kids to be again discriminate with the information that comes in, whether it be Twitter or through social media platforms. So use it as a learning device and not just um, a social interaction. And work with kids to help them be creators and creative.
Hmm.
So not just again experience of the worksheet, but what are we going to create as an artifact or project or capstone experience of our time to go to show what you've learned and demonstrate your abilities.
That's a thank you for that response, and I'm definitely going to benefit from that personally since we send our kids to private school. So thank you. And then I want to close it off with giving you the final remarks, Dr. Wood, in terms of again we're talking about promoting open conversations, and we talked about equality versus equity. We talked about your own experience and how traveling and interacting with different cultures definitely broadened your perspective and allowed you to pay it forward and give back to the community in terms of you getting that experience at Harvard in the 80s and then now being a coach here. So what are some final thoughts that you have in terms of the topic at hand?
I think that's so broad, but I think we talk about it from a perspective of conversations, and I think that specifically, maybe even more so with private schools, um, I think it would be good to bring in different perspectives and viewpoints, folks who can tell their story and share it so that we can begin to see other alternate perspectives, but also so that we can make connections with our own experience. And I think that's really part, again, I'm going to go back to, I think part of like the disconnect that we have in our nation. There's not enough listening, there's not enough sharing, and not enough empathy.
Hmm.
And I think the more experiences that we provide to people where they can hear the stories of others will definitely take us in the right direction.
Dr. Wood, thank you so much for giving us from your valuable time. It definitely was impactful and beneficial, and we hope our listeners were able to benefit as well.
All right, I thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a pleasure to be here and speak with you.
Thank you. And Dr. Wood, just hang out for 1 minute while I end up the show, and then I'll just give me 1 minute. I just want to remind everyone that today's show was brought to you by Live 5, acceducate.org/Live 5. ACC is an organization that provides interest free loans to students who are pursuing their higher educational dreams. So, in short, if you take a $40,000 loan, you only pay back $40,000, which is not the norm, right? The conventional system, if you take $40,000, you wind up paying significantly more. So, you study at cost, and then hopefully when you get your degree, you're able to pay it forward just like Dr. Wood and help out your community and help out your local and global community. So do check out acceducate.org and specifically acceducate.org/live5. It was a pleasure to have all of you on today, and we look forward to seeing you for the next webinar. Thank you.